book lovers, welcome back to Cabinet with Books. And I know it feels like it's been a very long time because, particularly for me, I've been in a reading slump for a very long time. And my slump this time has been pretty unusual. It's not like I absolutely don't want to read anything. I'll read some portions of a book and then I'll keep it aside and don't really want to get back to it. Then I'll read the next and keep it aside, don't really want to get back to it. And so happened. And I was trying to read different things, trying to experiment, but nothing seems to be working. So that's why this particular video of the monthly wrap up is going to be a pretty short one because I was able to complete just 9 books, which is fine because I also DNF'd around 5 books after giving them a try and then just stating out that okay, maybe I'm just not interested in them. And out of these 9 books also, I think I just have a handful of them that I really enjoyed. The rest were pretty much meh. So without any further ado, let's quickly get into the video and check out what are the books that I read this month. The first book that I completed was Children of Anguish and Anarchy, and this is the third book in the Orchard trilogy. Now, initially, I thought it would just be a duology. I wasn't even expecting about this book. But then again, when it came out, I obviously had to read it. And I read this book in a combination of physical book plus audiobook format. So that somehow worked well for me. But otherwise, I immediately fell into a slump after completing this one because okay, let's talk about the story first. The storyline follows the same protagonist who thought all her enemies are defeated, but then again, someone else is on the rise, and now she thinks that if she doesn't defeat this one particular person, everything else will fall apart. There are many other nations that have not yet been captured by him, and just to safeguard them and all the other people from the upcoming prophecy that has been prophesied long time ago, she's going to take her chances and fight the last battle. Now, the thing about this was the story was great, the plotline creation, characters, especially, oh my god, the characters were done really well in this book compared to the second book, where we somehow lost the charm that was built up in the first book, but the third book did have those character charms available. So I think that was a really good thing. But what it did not have was a solid purpose. It felt like they created another reason and there was no reason because those two books in itself were pretty closed in a loop, but then the third one arrived and this was additionally added to the loop. So there is this whole additional story, few additional characters, but there's also few additional prophecies and additional lines that have been introduced, which actually made sense. It was definitely entertaining and good to read, but was it really necessary to have another book in the series? I don't think so. But did I enjoy reading this one? Absolutely yes. Then we have Song of the Six Realms, which is a story inspired by Chinese mythology. And if you know me, I absolutely enjoy reading such books which have some sort of Chinese mythology influence or an influence of their folk tales introduced into the main storylines. And thankfully, this was a large part of the story was severely adapted and inspired from the folk tales of Chinese region. So that was a good point. Now, overall, this has two main characteristics that I could probably talk about from story perspective. One was its magical realism, sort of mythical element that was present, and the second was the gothic side of it, which popped up here and there to keep you on your spooky toes. Overall, the story was pretty well, but I think if you talk about the pacing of the story, the first first two-thirds portion of the book felt a bit tad slow compared to the last ending. I think there was nothing much happening for a very large amount of time, especially in the middle section of the book. And then suddenly everything was simply rushed to get a closure. And that gave a little bit of awkward hiccups to us while reading, and it did not do its best. I think if the pacing had been great, we would have enjoyed this book much more. Since I was in a mood to read a lot of mythology, I came across this next book, Sons of Darkness, which is another Indian mythology inspired story by Gaurav Mohanty. And this one is particularly inspired by the characters of Mahabharata. So, a lot of characters have been borrowed from Mahabharata into the stories, and there are two major parallel plot lines that are going on from storyline perspective. One is the story of Krishna and Bhanumati, and the second one is the story of Karan, his best friend, and another love angle that is being introduced later into the story. And while these characters were borrowed, I think it was partially that they had the same characteristics, partially that they had the same relationship dynamics amongst each other, but they also had few varied characteristics that were shown, especially if you talk about Karna's love angle and the way he behaves while he's traveling in the ship. I think those few things are pretty different. So my major concern here was that while you're actually developing characters, either develop them fully so that the reader understands, okay, I don't have to think about the characters that I already know from Mahabharata, but instead I have to focus on the characters that are present in this particular book. That means so and so. Now, what was happening was there was a partial influence of Mahabharata, and there was a partial new development or a novel angle that has been introduced. So a lot of the times I as a reader was pretty confused whether to opt for the vision that he's trying to create, but that vision again was not something that was developed for all the characters. It was just for the main 5 to 6 characters that are present in the story, and rest of them are not fully developed, I think. And after being such a chunky piece that this book was, I think there was scope to develop them and introduce them to the readers one by one so that it made sense in the brain that XYZ character is behaving in so and so manner. I think this book would do better to people who don't know anything about Mahabharata or the dynamics between the relationships and anything about those characters. Just a basic storyline, if they know, I think that would be enough for them to enjoy this in a more appropriate manner. Sadly, that did not happen in my case and did not work for me. Now, by this point, I was fully into my slump and I decided to read The Inevitable Fate because it gave me some sort of a connection to the magical destiny that's been foretold and that's bound to happen, sort of thing. So I said, okay, this might be a easy read, let's go with it. The storyline here is about two main characters who know each other somehow from their past births, if you know Punarjanam and sort of a story, and things that have happened in the past in their previous birth are meant to repeat again, and it's up to the protagonist to stop that fate and change it. And if he doesn't, the same things will happen over and over again. And I think in this one it has that criteria of 3 times. If it happens 3 times, it's like permanent done and dusted kind of a deal. The protagonist, if I talk about the boy, he has been constantly on the move while living with his mother, growing up, and never been able to settle into a single place. Now, however, since he's going to NYU, he's really happy that he's going to be settled in for a long time over there for his college program in the art section. And he, however, finds the fates turning their wheels once again. Once he enters NYU, he comes across face to face with a girl he has always imagined in his head and always drew a sketch or painted about her. And now he's really astonished to see her face to face, and there's this really emerging chemistry between those two characters, and things are happening and they are connecting and so on and so forth. And that actually leads him to research further about their connections and everything going ahead. Now, this whole story then goes ahead into the whole research, the interlinking of the previous births and how things happened back then, him getting to understand that, him trying to, stop the inevitable things from happening without giving you much of spoilers. And that's where the storyline will take place. Now, if you talk about the plot or the storyline perspective, it's really good. I cannot pinpoint anything that wouldn't be good for me to enjoy while reading it. Had the twists also been delivered with the same impact that the storyline was working towards, I think this would have been a really great read for me. But since the twists were a little off track, the timing was not right, the characters were not reacting the way I thought in my head they would, or way it should have gone, I think that was a little disappointing from a reader's point of view. And I really wished the twists were fine tuned a bit more for the reader to have that kind of an impact while reading the story. Now, by the time I actually decided to pick this book, I was already in a almost 2 weeks reading slump, not reading anything at all. And I then decided, okay, that's it. I cannot do this any further. I need to get back to my reading goals and jam it together really well. And that's where I decided to pick this one up. The story here is pretty magical, whimsical, childlike story because it's obviously a middle grade. I think middle grade really helped me, but I was looking forward to that one entertaining aspect that really made me enjoy reading for the love of reading itself and not just as a core task of reading. And that's where I decided to go with this book, and it did pull me out of my slump. Talking about the storyline perspective, nobody in the village where these tiny humans live has seen any giant for ages now. Giants have been a thing of past. The war has ended, and all people are living their lives, doing their course and everything, and everyday routine sort of a thing. But suddenly one day, the sky opens up from a particular place, and a giant, a really big giant, just falls down. And as they discover, it's not an ordinary giant. He's looking out to be a really prestigious one. And the second issue is that he's dead. Yeah. So, a dead giant on the land of tiny people living in their village, they decide that it's finally time to use those magical beans and plant a tree. And that reminded me of Jack and the Bean story, which I read in my childhood. And it was some sort of a nostalgic reminder. Plus, this had a little different approach to it. So, it was a really interesting novel story. So, they decide that the villagers must send someone to inform the people above living in the giant kingdom about what just happened, and that they meant it to be peaceful and they are here to help. So, the messengers who are sent above go up in the giant kingdom, and then they understand that okay, he was actually a royalty, not just a royal, the crown prince supposed to be the next king, and he's dead. And then while they are there, kept in the giant kingdom's dollhouse sort of a room, they are simply trying to investigate things while the giants also investigate. There is a parallel investigation going on, and the whole murder mystery is trying to be solved. See, the story was really great, and I don't think it takes that much amount of effort or really that many elements to bring a short, crisp, beautiful story for readers to enjoy. It has all of those and just worked really perfect for me. Now, as the title suggests, this was indeed a very one of a kind, peculiar read for me. This is a memoir of Isaac Dahl, and in here he shares 12 beautiful incidents of his life that he felt were really impactful in making him the version he is today. And after being 96 years old, he decided to filter down his life to these 12 incidents and convert them into single chapter stories or single chapter incidents being shared with you guys, where he shares about his life, and right from the point of his childhood, where the first one is about the avalanche breakdown that happened and how he survived it. And from there you discover many stories across the country about his life, how he lived there as a journalist, and what kind of life he led, and so many different incidences. I think because it had so many novel angles introduced in each chapter, it kept me going somehow, and I did not fall back into the slump. And even after reading those 12 chapters, I still want to know more about the author. I mean, it's a fantastic thing to write a book once you decide to get 96 years old. I think it's really commendable, and I am just in awe with it. Now, our next book was Broken Bio, which is a psychological mystery thriller book, and I think I needed one to really, get back into the game of reading with the pacing that I have. Fortunately, it did work. The story here is about a child psychologist who left her town long time ago for a fresh start, where she overcame her trauma and decided to devote her career into child psychology and help other people get out of their trauma as well. But when a severe incident happens in one of her interviews that goes viral over YouTube, her career is almost smashed, and I think she's now thinking about how to go around with life when suddenly she receives a call from the Broken Bayou to go and collect some things from her aunt's place, and that's where she's headed now. What she does not know is everything is about to change from here. Nothing will be the same. There are hidden graves, hidden secrets that are about to be unearthed as soon as she steps into the town. And with the current controversy surrounding her, now is out of all times is not really the best time to be there. I think I enjoyed most of the parts of this book, apart from the residents who were living in Broken Bayou. I think they were really mean, gossiping kind of people, but that could be the point of view the author wanted to project upon this town and the people there. But other than that, I think the thrills, the twists were really good. Even up until the very end, you would be constantly pointing fingers to find out who the real killer is in this case, because everyone matches the criteria that they have described, and you'll feel like, yeah, he really fits into that mold, but it's not him. Next book that I have is the second book after the Kamogawa Food Detectives. This one is the Restaurant of Lost Recipes, following the same theme line where there is a detective store in place which actually helps you detect old recipes that have been lost to time and are really dear to your heart. And it shares across stories of different cases of different people who actually come to them with some sort of a lost recipe that they really want to reinculcate in their life, and they want to know how it was really made. A lot of connections have been made with food, just like in book one. I did enjoy most parts of the stories, though a bit at times it felt a little too stretched. And if you're not really a foodie, or especially if you don't really understand the cuisine that they are talking about, I think it can be a tad bit slow, and you may feel to skip few portions in there. And that's the kind of a approach. Even the detective stories that they narrate, the detective styles is also pretty slow, so they'll slowly point out one, then next, then next. So it's a little slow, but it's kind of a cozy detective story, so you don't really expect a lot of pacing out of it. But it was a fine read. I really loved the first book. This one was okay, fine, good enough for me. This is the final book that I read, The Hire of Venus, and the storyline here is followed mostly around the timelines of after Troy. So Ines is rumored to be the son of Venus, and he has his own place in Troy. He escaped Troy when the city was burning along with his son, because there is a separate prophecy that has been told about him, and he wants that prophecy to come true. Because during Troy, he had seen all things that happen if humans don't cater to the demands of gods and work according to their whims. They would simply just burn cities, people would die, and he doesn't want all those things to happen. So he has decided that he's just going to get through with the destiny that he has in charge. On the other hand, Lavina, living on this beautiful place on an island, has been promised at a very young age to a certain person. But at the last moment, her father decides that this person coming across from the sea, whose name is Ines, would be a better suitor to her daughter. And he promises her hand later on to him. So the other person whose hand was promised for Lavina, he decides to wage war against him. And there's this whole war strategy going on, people camping, people trooping together, and other things. And amongst all these things that are going on, there is a separate storyteller in the camp that Lavina is living, and she comes across her stories and decides that she would be a good companion for her as a lady's maid or something, just to tell her stories and accompany her here and there. But there is far major history behind the storyteller and Ines, who has come from far off lands. The storyline and especially the narration style of this book worked really well, because they were the things that actually kept you captured into the story, following the three different timeline stories of Ines when he was in Troy, when he was with that storyteller's sister, and when he's in present situation with Lavina. All those three stories are told in alternating format, and then you connect the dots and you have a very beautiful story to read around. And that, my friends, were all the books that I read in the month of July. I hope you had a wonderful time watching this cute short wrap of books that I read over this month. Let me know in the comments down below. Have you read any book this month? And what is the next book that you are looking forward to? I'll catch up with you in my next video. Until then, keep your coffee strong and your TBS long. Goodbye.